there's a twist in the tale.
Brilliant ideas, I mean really brilliant ones, are very rare and can get you right to the top. But of course, if they go wrong, they can ruin even the champion of the world.
Masterminded by Roald Dahl, The Champion of the World is another in our series of short stories by the world's greatest suspense writers. But listen carefully. There's a twist in the tale.
All day, in between serving customers, they'd been crouching over the table in the office of the filling station, preparing the raisins. They were plump and soft and swollen from being soaked in water, and when you nicked them with the razor blade, the skin sprang open, and the jelly stuff inside squeezed out as easily as you could wish. But they had 196 to do altogether, and the evening was nearly upon them before they had finished.
Cool. Don't they look marvellous, eh? What time is it, Gordon?
Just after 5.
Oh, we ought to be moving soon. Whole thing will be a washout if we don't arrive before sunset. You realise that?
He was getting twitchy now. His face had the same flushed and pop-eyed look it got before a dog race, or when there was a date with Clarice in the evening.
All right, then. Lock up.
OK. While I'm doing that, you better take off that yellow pullover.
Eh? Why should I?
Well, you'll be shining like a ruddy beacon out there in the moonlight.
I'll be all right.
You will not. Take it off, Gordon, please. I'll see you in 3 minutes.
He disappeared into his caravan behind the filling station, and Gordon went indoors and changed his pullover for a blue one. When they met again outside, Claude was dressed in a pair of dark trousers and a dark green turtleneck sweater, under which lolled a suspicious-looking bulge.
What's under there?
Claude pulled up his sweater and showed his friend 2 thin but very large white cotton sacks, which were bound neat and tight around his belly.
To carry the stuff. Now, come on, let's go.
I still think we ought to take the car.
No, it's too risky. They'll see it parked.
But it's over 3 miles up to that wood.
Yeah, I suppose you realise we can get 6 months in a clink if they catch us.
Eh? You never told me that.
Didn't I?
I'm not coming. It's not worth it.
Oh, come on. A walk will do you good. You got the raisins?
They're in my pocket.
Good. Marvellous.
10 minutes later, they turned left off the main road into a narrow lane with high hedges on either side. From now on, it was all uphill.
Claude, how many keepers are there?
3. You know, I don't usually approve of new methods, not on this sort of job.
Of course.
But by heaven, Gordon, I think we're on to a hot one this time. It'll be a milestone in the history of poaching. But don't go telling a single soul how he done it. Because if this ever leaked out, we'd have every ruddy fool in the district doing the same thing, and there wouldn't be a perishing pheasant left.
I won't say a word.
Oh, you ought to be proud of yourself. There's been men with brains studying this problem for hundreds of years, and not one of them has come up with anything even a quarter as artful as you have. Why didn't you tell me about it before?
Well, you never invited my opinion.
And that was the truth. In fact, up until the day before, Claude had never even offered to discuss with Gordon the sacred subject of poaching. Often enough, on a summer's evening when work was finished, he had seen him with cap on head, sliding quietly out of his caravan and disappearing up the road towards the woods. It seemed to Gordon that recently Claude's whole attitude towards poaching had undergone a subtle and mysterious change. He was more purposeful about it now, more tight-lipped and intense than ever before. And Gordon had the impression that this was not so much a game any longer as a crusade, a sort of private war that Claude was waging single-handed against an invisible and hated enemy. But who? Well, Gordon wasn't sure about this, but he had a suspicion it was none other than the famous Mr. Victor Hazel himself, the owner of the land and the pheasants. Mr. Hazel was a local brewer with an unbelievably arrogant manner. He was rich beyond words, with no charm at all, and precious few virtues. He loathed all persons of humble station, having once been one of them himself, and he strove desperately to mingle with what he believed were the right kind of folk. He rode to hounds and gave shooting parties and wore fancy waistcoats, and every weekday he drove an enormous black Rolls-Royce past the filling station on his way to the brewery. Anyway, yesterday afternoon, right out of the blue, Claude had said to Gordon,
"I'll be going up to Hazel's Wood again tonight. Why don't you come along, Gordon?"
Who, me?
Yeah, it's about the last chance this year for pheasants, you know. The shooting season opens Saturday, and the birds will be scattered all over the place after that, if there's any left.
Why the sudden invitation?
Oh, no special reason, Gordon. No reason at all.
I suppose you keep a gun or something hidden away up there?
A gun? Well, nobody ever shoots pheasants, didn't you know that? You've only got to fire a cap pistol in Hazel's Wood, and the keepers will be onto you.
Then how do you do it?
And you think you could keep your mouth shut if I was to tell you a thing or two?
Well, definitely.
Well, pheasants is crazy about raisins.
Raisins?
Yeah, just ordinary raisins. It's like a mania with them. My dad discovered that more than 40 years ago. My dad, Gordon, was possibly the greatest poacher there's ever been in the history of England. He studied it like a scientist. Now, what he did with his raisins was...
Claude, I've just had a bit of an idea.
Well, if it's about poaching, keep it. You're talking about a subject you don't know the first thing about.
No, hang on now. Do you remember that bottle of sleeping pills the doc gave me last month when I had a bad back, eh?
Well, what about it?
Well, now, is there any reason why those shouldn't work on a pheasant?
It's not worth discussing. No pheasant in the world is going to swallow those lousy red capsules. Don't you know any better than that?
No, but you're forgetting the raisins. Now, listen to this. We take a raisin, see?
Yeah.
Then we soak it till it swells. Then we make a tiny slit in one side of it with a razor blade, see?
Yeah.
And we hollow it out a little. Then we open up one of my red capsules and pour all the powder into the raisin. And then we get a needle and cotton and very carefully we sew up the slit.
Out of the corner of his eye, Gordon saw Claude's mouth slowly begin to open.
Now, we have a nice, clean-looking raisin with 2.5 grains of seconal inside it. And that, my friend, is enough dope to knock the average man unconscious, never mind about birds.
You beautiful, beautiful boy. How many pills you got left?
49. There were 50 in the bottle, but I only used one.
49's not enough. We want at least 200.
Are you mad?
200's a bare minimum. There's really not much point in doing it unless we have 200.
What are you going to do with so many pheasants?
Why? Do you have any objections?
Gordon suddenly realized what Claude was planning. The crazy idiot was out to wreck Mr. Victor Hazel's opening day shooting party. This shooting party took place on the first day of October every year, when debilitated gentlemen in tweed suits, some with titles and some who were merely rich, motored in from miles around with their gun-bearers and dogs and wives. All day long the noise of shooting rolled across the valley, and there were always enough pheasants to go round. For each summer the woods were methodically restocked with dozens and dozens of young birds at incredible expense. And now Claude was out to wreck it in one fell swoop.
Gordon, why couldn't we divide up the contents of one capsule among 4 raisins? I mean, would it be strong enough for each bird?
A quarter would be plenty.
Lovely. That means we'd have 196 raisins. I'll tell you what, we won't go tonight. We'll go tomorrow instead. We'll soak the raisins overnight, and then we'll have all morning and afternoon to get them ready.
And that was precisely what they did. Now, 24 hours later, they were very nearly there. The lane along which they had struggled ran along the crest of the hill, right up to the wood itself, and then skirted the edge of it for about 300 yards, with only a little hedge between. Claude slipped through the hedge on all fours, and Gordon followed. It was cool and dark inside the wood. No sunlight came in at all. Then, through the gloom, a large patch of sky appeared ahead of them in the roof of the forest, and Gordon knew that this must be the clearing.
There's always plenty of pheasants in the clearing.
Yeah. keepers too, I suppose.
Yeah. But there's thick bushes all round, and that helps. They always bring the young uns there when they restock, and a lot of them stay there until the shooting begins, you see. Sort of force of habit, I suppose.
They were now advancing in a series of quick, crouching spurts, running from tree to tree and stopping and waiting and listening and running on again. And then at last they were kneeling safely behind a big clump of alder right on the edge of the clearing. Claude was grinning and nudging the other in the ribs.
But Claude, this place is absolutely stiff with birds.
Yeah.
There must be 200 of them at least strutting around there.
It was an astonishing sight, a sort of poacher's dream come true. And how close they were. Some of them not more than 10 paces from where the duo knelt. Claude's big, ox-like face was transfixed in ecstasy. The mouth was slightly open, and the eyes had a kind of glazy look about them.
Cool. That must be just about the most beautiful sight I've ever seen.
Let's go get 'em.
Wait. Don't move. Look over there.
He pointed to the far side of the clearing, towards a large tree, beneath which stood a keeper, cap on head and a gun under his arm. He wasn't moving, but he was looking directly at them. Gordon looked with horror at the post-like figure of the keeper staring at them. His body gathered itself for a desperate dash to freedom.
Let's go. It's all right. He can't see us.
Slowly, never taking his eyes from the keeper, Claude reached into his pocket and brought out a single raisin. Then with a little flick of the wrist, he threw it high into the air. He saw it land within a yard or so of 2 hen birds standing together beside an old tree stump. Both birds turned their heads sharply at the drop of the raisin. Then one of them hopped over and made a quick peck at the ground.
The keeper hasn't noticed anything.
Of course he hasn't. Right. One more. And the third. And the fourth. And the fifth.
At this point, the keeper turned away his head in order to survey the wood behind him. Quick as a flash, Claude pulled a paper bag out of his pocket and tipped a huge pile of raisins into the cup of his right hand. Then with a great sweep of the arm, he flung the whole handful high over the bushes into the clearing. They fell with a soft little patter like raindrops on dry leaves, and every single pheasant in the place must either have seen them coming or heard them fall. There was a flurry of wings and a rush to find the treasure, and with it the keeper's head flicked round as though there were a spring in his neck. He took 2 quick paces forward and for a moment made as if he was going in to investigate. But then he stopped, and his face came up, and his eyes began travelling slowly around the perimeter of the clearing.
Follow me and keep down. Crawl as low as you can get. For heaven's sake, stop being in such a hurry. You're bumping up against me all the time. Now run!
They got to their feet and ran, and a few minutes later emerged through the hedge into the lovely open safety of the lane.
Oh, it went marvellous, eh? Hey, didn't it go absolutely marvellous, eh?
It was a mess.
What?
Well, of course it was. We can't possibly go back now. That keeper knows there was someone there.
Yeah, he knows nothing. In another 5 minutes it'll be pitch dark inside the wood, and he'll be sloping off home for his supper.
I think I'll join him.
Oh, you're a great poacher, you are. Gordon, how long does it take for a sleeping pill to work?
Hey, look out. There's someone coming.
Another ruddy keeper.
They both looked at the keeper as he came down the lane towards them. He had a shotgun under his arm, and there was a black Labrador walking at his heels.
Good evening.
Yeah, I know you. I know the both of you. You're from the filling station, right? Yeah, you're Cubbage and Oars. You're from the filling station of the main road, right?
What are we playing? 20 questions?
I'll beat it. Go on, get out.
This happens to be a public highway. Kindly do not molest us.
Yeah, well, you're loitering with intent to commit a felony. I could run you in for that.
No, you couldn't.
Yeah, well, I've had my eye on you for some time. Go on.
It's getting late. Shall we stroll on?
Oh, all right then. Let's go.
They wandered off down the lane, leaving the keeper standing there, and soon the man was out of sight in the half-darkness behind them.
That's the head keeper. His name's Rabbits. Don't worry about him. He's also due for his supper. He won't be coming back tonight.
How do you know that?
A keeper never waits for you in the woods if he knows where you live. He goes to your house and hides outside and watches for you to come back.
But that's worse.
No, it isn't. Not if you duck the loot somewhere else before you go home. He can't touch you then.
What about the other one, huh? The one in the clearing?
He's gone too. Look, Gordon, I've been studying them for months. Honest, I have. I know all their habits. There's no danger.
Reluctantly, Gordon followed him back into the wood. It was pitch dark in there now, and very silent. And as they moved cautiously forward, the noise of their footsteps seemed to go echoing around the walls of the forest, as though they were walking in a cathedral.
Here's where we threw the raisins.
You're quite sure the keeper's gone?
I know he's gone.
Are they roosting?
Yeah, they're all round here. They don't go far.
Ah. Well, what do we do next?
We stay here and wait. I brought you a light. Here, you might need it.
I've just had a nasty thought, Claude. If a bird can keep its balance on a branch when it's asleep, then surely there isn't any reason why the pills should make it fall down. I mean, after all, it's not dead, it's only sleeping.
Well, it's doped.
But that's just a deeper sort of sleep. Why should we expect it to fall down just because it's in a deeper sleep?
Yeah, we should have experimented with chickens first. My dad would have done that.
Hey, what was that?
Shh. There's another.
They're pheasants.
Find them quickly. They can't be far.
Claude found the first one, of course, a magnificent cock-bird which he held lovingly in both hands.
Ooh, it's doped to the gills. It's still alive. I can hear its heart beating, but it's doped to the ruddy gills.
Then all at once the pheasants started raining down out of the trees, and the two raced round madly in the dark, sweeping the ground with their flashlights. One batch hurtled down from the tree under which Gordon was standing, and they almost fell on top of him. He found them immediately, 2 cocks and a hen. They were limp and warm, the feathers wonderfully soft in his hand.
Where shall I put them?
Lay them here, Gordon. Just pile them up here where it's light.
Claude was standing on the edge of the clearing, with the moon streaming down all over him. His face was bright, his eyes big and bright and wonderful, and he was staring around him like a child who has just discovered that the whole world is made of chocolate. And the skies poured out pheasants in a never-ending flood.
I don't like it. It's too many.
It's beautiful. Oh, that twit hazel ought to hear this.
Don't shout. There might be keepers.
Forget the keepers. They're all eating.
For 3 or 4 minutes the pheasants kept on falling. And suddenly they stopped.
Keep searching. There's plenty more on the ground.
Don't you think we ought to get out while the going's good?
Never.
They went on searching. Between them they looked under every tree within 100 yards of the clearing, north, south, east and west. And they probably found most of them in the end. At the collecting point there was a pile of pheasants as big as a bonfire.
Gordon, I'd like to count them.
There's no time for that.
I must count them.
And he began doing so, very carefully, picking up each bird in turn and laying it carefully to one side.
117, 118, 119, 120. 120 birds. Oh, it's an all-time record.
You're the champion of the world. Are you ready now?
Hey, 1 minute. Here, let's get these sacks out. That's it. Here you are. Here's yours now. Start filling it up.
They loaded the birds into the sacks. They were soft and floppy-necked, and the skin underneath the feathers was still warm. Gordon must have had 60 birds in his sack, and it was so heavy he had to drag it behind him towards the hedge and the lane.
There'll be a taxi waiting for us in the lane.
What?
Well, I always go back in a taxi, Gordon. Didn't you know that?
No.
A taxi's anonymous. Nobody knows who's inside the taxi except the driver. Me dad taught me that.
Which driver?
Charlie Kinch. He's only too happy to oblige.
2 minutes later, they were safely inside the taxi, cruising slowly down the hill towards the village. It was all over now, bar the shouting. Claude was triumphant, bursting with pride and excitement, and he kept leaning forward and tapping Charlie Kinch on the shoulder and saying,
"How about it, eh, Charlie? What about this for all, eh?"
And Charlie kept glancing back pop-eyed at the huge bulging sacks lying on the floor and shaking his head.
But what in heaven's name are we going to do with 120 pheasants?
Put 'em in cold storage for the winter.
Eh?
Yeah, put 'em in with the dog meat in the deep freeze at the filling station.
Not tonight, I trust.
Oh, of course not. Not with rabbits watching the house. We leave 'em at Bessie's for the night.
Bessie who?
Bessie Organ.
Bessie Organ?
Yeah, Bessie always delivers me game. Didn't you know that?
As far as Gordon was concerned, he didn't know anything. He was completely stunned. Mrs. Organ was the wife of the Reverend Jack Organ, the local vicar. The next morning, Claude announced that Bessie was coming down the road. He seemed to refer to her with a slightly proprietary air, as though he were a general referring to his bravest officer. Gordon followed him outside and looked down the road, where he could see a small female figure advancing towards them.
What's she pushing?
There's only one safe way of delivering game, and that's under a baby. There's 60 or 70 pheasants under that little nipper.
You can't put 60 or 70 pheasants in a pram.
You can if it's got a deep, good well underneath it. And if you take out a mattress and pack 'em in tight, right up to the top, all you need then is a sheet. Oh, you'll be surprised how little room a pheasant takes when it's limp. Good old Bessie, right through the village as bold as brass.
She seems in rather a hurry to me.
Oh, Bessie's never in a hurry.
Well, she certainly isn't walking normal, Claude. You look.
Yeah, she does seem to be going a tiny bit quick.
She's running. Look.
Claude stood very still watching the woman. And in the silence that followed, they both heard the baby screaming. Suddenly, out of the pram, straight up into the air, flew an enormous pheasant. The truck driver going along beside Bessie started roaring with laughter as the bird flapped around drunkenly for a few seconds, then lost its height and landed in the grass. Then whoosh! A second pheasant flew up out of the pram. Then a third, and a fourth, and a fifth.
Oh, no. It's the pills. They're wearing off.
Bessie covered the last 50 yards at a tremendous pace, and she came swinging into the driveway of the filling station with baby yelling and birds flying up out of the pram in all directions.
Go round the back. Round the back.
No! Don't lift the baby! Put him back! Hold down the sheet!
But she wasn't even listening, and with the weight of the child suddenly lifted away, a great cloud of pheasants rose up out of the pram. They flapped their wings furiously to gain height, but being still too dopey, they flopped down again to settle themselves like a swarm of locusts all over the front of the filling station. Gordon glanced at his watch. It was 20 to 9. Any moment now, a large black car was going to come streaking along the road from the direction of the village. And the face behind the wheel was going to be the great, glistening brewer's face of Mr. Victor Hazel.
That was The Champion of the World by Roald Dahl, adapted for radio by Stephen Barden and produced by Brian Squires. Listen again next week at this time for another in our series of short stories from the world's greatest suspense writers. But beware, there's a twist in the tale.